My family uninvited me from Christmas at the $8,000 chalet I paid for, so I canceled it and watched their perfect holiday dreams collapse. My name is Patrick. I'm 28, and my family's connection with me has always been complex. From the outside, we appear to be the picture-perfect suburban family. Dad, with his tidy business attire and know-it-all attitude. Mom, who insists on keeping the peace yet always appears to support him. My younger sister Vanessa, the golden kid, could set the house on fire and still be described as spirited rather than reckless. Then there's me, the one who always worked hard, tried to keep my head down, yet still got treated like an outsider. For as far as I can remember, Christmas has served as their platform. Each year followed the same pattern. Vanessa received the spotlight. Dad delivered platitudes about family values, and Mom preoccupied herself with making everything appear ideal while ignoring the less-than-perfect comments hurled my way. I learned to deal with the passive-aggressive jabs, comparisons, and tiny reminders that I wasn't quite one of them as Vanessa was. However, over the last year, I began to suspect that something had changed. I had a solid job and a steady paycheck, and for once, I wanted to contribute to the holiday to make it feel like I wasn't simply a bystander in their world. That's how the chalet arrived. I found this lovely cabin-style chalet in the Highlands. Snow all around, a wood-burning fireplace, and large windows facing out into the slopes. It was the type of vacation destination that people put on postcards. I spent weeks looking for the appropriate spot, calculating my budget, and finally booking the entire place. $8,000 went quickly, but it was worthwhile because I hoped this year would be different. Maybe they'd realize how much I cared and wanted to be a bigger part of the family Christmas ritual. I also texted Dad the hotel confirmation so he could boast to his buddies. He didn't thank me. He just remarked, "Good. That's the least you could do." At the time I dismissed it. That was just Dad, never giving me credit and never saying no. However, when December approached, the fissures reappeared. Vanessa kept saying it was her chalet trip, as if I had planned it for her. She even mentioned it on social media, stating, "Can't wait for our family Christmas at the chalet Dad rented." That stings. I was not even mentioned. When I questioned her why she phrased it that way, she simply smiled and said, "Relax, Patrick. No one cares who booked it. It's all Dad's idea anyway." That should have been my first major clue. I still wanted to believe. I hoped that once we arrived, they might surprise me with some gratitude. Instead, everything came to a head on a typical Wednesday night in early December. I had swung by my folks' place after work to drop off some boxes of decorations I had bought up. They were sitting in the living room sipping wine as usual, and Vanessa was spread on the couch, discussing what outfits she would bring. I was about to add how I had stocked up on supplies for the chalet when Dad interrupted. "You're not invited to Christmas this year," he yelled, as if he were instructing me to take out the trash. I froze, the words barely registering at first. "What?" I said, wondering whether I had misheard. "You heard me," he replied bluntly, swirling his wine glass. "It's going to be a family-only Christmas. We don't need complications. You can do your own thing." I recall giggling under my breath, more out of surprise than amusement. "Is it just the family? I am literally your son." Vanessa sneered at me from the sofa. "Dad just means it's going to be less stressful without you. Don't make a scene, Patrick." And Mom, sweet, always neutral Mom, just gave me a pitying look, as if I were a stranger looking for a place to stay. "Maybe it's for the best, dear. We want peace this year." I can't put into words how I felt at the time. Yes, it hurts. Betrayal, of course. But largely it was this cold clarity, like if a curtain had fallen and I could finally see them for who they truly were. For years, I had been pursuing bits of validation, attempting to fit in, and in one remark, Dad made it clear that I never did. I did not argue, I did not beg. I just nodded, laid the box of decorations down on the floor, and said, "Fine." They undoubtedly assumed I was upset, that I'd go home and cry about being excluded. But in reality, my thoughts were already moving. I remembered the chalet reservation that was in my inbox, the one booked in my name, using my card and money. And as I walked out of their house that night, with their smug expressions behind me, I realized something. They thought they had Christmas wrapped up, that they could obliterate me as if I were nothing. They had no idea what was coming. That night, I got down at my laptop, opened up the bank transfers, and secretly transferred the holiday monies I had sent to Dad back into my account. $8,000 fell back into its proper location. Then I opened the chalet reservation, and with a simple click, canceled it entirely. No penalty. It was still early enough. The best aspect was that the booking was in Dad's name on paper since I wanted him to feel involved. But the payments were mine, so when the cancellation went through, the credit was returned to me. I didn't tell them, of course. I went to bed with a peculiar calm, partly expecting a fallout. The next morning, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. I had 31 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and one message that stopped me in my tracks. And that's when things really started to disintegrate. My father sent the message, which was short and to the point, as if he still had control of the situation. Call me back. Now. I didn't. I sat there with my coffee, reading through his prior voicemails, each of which was angrier than the last. First, there was confusion. Patrick, there's a mistake. The chalet reservation isn't showing up on my account. Call them and fix it. The tone switched to annoyance. This isn't funny. If you're pulling some stunt, you better undo it immediately. Finally, the inevitable wrath. You think this makes you clever? You've embarrassed me, Patrick. Do you understand that? Fix this. Now. He was shamed. That was what mattered most. Not the fact that his son was reportedly not invited to Christmas, not the sheer chutzpah of dumping me after I'd paid for everything. No, the main sin here was that his friends and extended family would soon learn that the big chalet trip was not going to happen. His pride had been harmed, and in his society, it was unforgivable. Vanessa began contacting me about midday. Her tone was harsher than Dad's, less furious and more entitled. Are you seriously doing this to us? You promised we'd have Christmas at the chalet. All my friends know about it, Patrick. I already told everyone. Do you even care what this does to me? I could almost hear her whimpering voice through the text. I didn't respond. Silence was more powerful than any words I could have typed back. That nightfall, however, the real games began. Mom arrived at my place unexpectedly, bearing a casserole, as she often did when she wanted to soften terrible news. She let herself in using the spare key I hadn't aware she still possessed. Patrick, she murmured with a studied, charming tone. I believe we got off to a bad start last night. You are aware of your father's harsh language at times. He didn't say you weren't welcome. It was simply tension talking. I stared at her, really curious. So now I'm invited? Her smile faded, but she continued. Certainly. But only if you resolve the chalet issue. Your father's reputation is at stake, and many are looking forward to this trip. It would mean so much to everyone if you just handled it quietly. The manipulation was so obvious that I almost laughed. It was not about me being included. It was about me cleaning up their messes. I inquired, and if I don't? She placed the casserole on my counter, folded her hands together as if praying, and groaned. Then I'm afraid you'll be making things very difficult for this family. Do you really want to ruin Christmas for your sister? It was back there. Vanessa prioritizes her happiness above all else. I remembered birthdays when Mom received extravagant gifts while I received utilitarian items such as socks or notebooks. I remembered when she crashed my car and my parents advised me not to be selfish because Vanessa had been through enough stress. The same trend was repeating. My sacrifice. Her spotlight. I did not give Mom the reaction she expected. I just remarked, "Thanks for the casserole," and accompanied her to the door. She stared at me with a sad little expression, as if I were the problem child throwing a tantrum, and said, "Your father is very disappointed in you." That night, Vanessa connected me to a new group chat she had formed. The name of it is Christmas at the Chalet Snowflake Christmas Tree. The irony almost killed me. She must not have understood I had canceled everything because her messages were full of gushing about ski suits, champagne, and Instagram photographs she'd take by the fireplace. Dad said, "I'll handle the wine. Don't worry." Mom responded emojis. It was as if they were attempting to make me disappear, despite the fact that I was the one who made it possible. Finally, Vanessa tagged me. "Patrick, could you please send the updated booking confirmation? Dad wants to ensure that the dinner reservations are set up." I glanced at the message for a long time, unsure what to do. Every instinct pushed me to tell the truth right then in the chat, to expose them as the greedy, entitled family they'd always been. But something inside me said it wasn't time. Not yet. Allow them to spin their dreams a little longer. Let them believe that everything was under control. The longer they dangled on the hook, the more satisfying it would be when reality finally snapped tight. The anxiety just increased from there. Over the next week, they began throwing signals to extended family members, boasting about the chalet trip and implying that Vanessa was somehow hosting it. One of my aunts even contacted me, perplexed, saying, "Your sister told me you're not coming this year. That can't be right, can it?" When I gently told her that Dad had uninvited me, she gasped and exclaimed, But you're the one who paid. Word spread. I could sense their immaculate little facade breaking around the edges. And with each crack, their texts became more frenzied and desperate. But nothing prepared me for the night Dad personally arrived at my apartment door. Not with rage this time, but with something far worse. False charm. He stood there in his pressed coat, holding a bottle of wine, as if we were longtime friends. "Patrick, son," he spoke smoothly. "We need to talk about this chalet situation. I know you're upset, but let's be adults. We can work something out." That's when I knew they weren't simply panicked. They were scheming. Dad did not go inside right away. He stayed at the doorway like a salesman who refuses to leave until you sign on the dotted line. He smiled. But it wasn't a warm one. It was the tight, calculating style that I had seen him use in business meetings when I was younger. The sort that said he was already planning 10 steps ahead, and I was just another pawn. "Can I come in?" he inquired finally. I hesitated, but curiosity got the best of me. I opened the door wider to let him enter. He placed the bottle of wine on my counter without asking, as if he owned the place. We sat across from one another, the stillness lengthening. Then he leaned forward, elbows on knees, and said, "Listen, about what I said the other night. Uninvited." That was harsh. I was frustrated. You know how things get. I did not respond. I just let him continue talking. He shifted in his seat. "Your sister's been under a lot of stress lately. Her job's shaky. She's worried about money, and this chalet trip, well, it's important for her. She wants to impress her friends, keep her reputation intact. You understand, don't you?" There it was, the speech I had been expecting. Vanessa's sentiments are once again the #1 priority. My role was to fix her life, to ensure she always looked wonderful while I remained unseen. Dad cleared his throat and leaned back. "So, here's what we'll do. You'll rebook the chalet, use your card again, I know you can afford it, and put it under my name so I can manage things properly. In exchange, we will discuss increasing your involvement in family decisions in the future, as you express a desire to participate. More involved, as if I hadn't been attempting to be a part of things all along, as if belonging to my own family was some sort of reward he could dangle in front of me, if only I paid the price." I held my voice steady. "So let me get this straight. You want me to rebook an $8,000 trip after you told me I wasn't invited, just so Vanessa doesn't get embarrassed?" His smile faltered for a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. "It's not about embarrassment. It's about family unity. You wouldn't want to be responsible for ruining Christmas, would you?" I nearly laughed. Family unity. The phrase seemed absurd coming from him. But I kept quiet, allowing the silence to grow heavier. Dad despised silence. He was continually rushing to fill it. And sure enough, he began talking again. But this time his tone was harsher. "If you refuse, Patrick, you are sending a clear message to your mother, sister, and everyone else that you do not care about them. And if that's the path you want to go..." He hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "Then don't expect us to be there for you when you need us." That was the betrayal, not the words. I had known deep down for years that they would never truly be there for me. It was the coldness behind them, the transactional manner he presented it. For him, family was not about love or fidelity. It was leverage. I swallowed hard and kept my emotions in check. "So you're threatening to cut me off unless I pay for everything again?" Dad leaned back and crossed his arms. "Not a threat, just reality. You're old enough to understand how the world works. Nothing's free." That word shattered something in me. I recalled all the times I'd gone out of my way to aid them. The loans I provided after Dad's investments failed. I spent my weekends mending stuff around their house. Vanessa was lauded for doing the bare minimum, and I had showed unending patience. And here he was, staring me full in the eyes and insisting that none of it mattered unless I opened my wallet again. I'm not sure if he saw the change in my expression, but for the first time that night, I believe he recognized I wasn't going to cave. His phony charm crumbled slightly, and he whispered, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Patrick." But the treachery wasn't over. 2 days later I received a call from my bank. "This is a flagged transaction. Someone tried to exploit my account information to make a huge purchase. A reservation deposit for a chalet. And the name on the attempted booking was my father's." That was when the final thread of confidence snapped. When the bank informed me of the attempted booking, my initial emotion was not even anger. It was a strange hollow feeling, as if the floor had gone out from beneath me. I anticipated Dad would try to manipulate me, but I didn't expect him to go so far as to attempt fraud with my personal information. The bank representative politely explained that the transaction was reported because the billing name did not match the account holder. Otherwise, it could have gone through. I thanked them, hung up and sat staring at my phone, stunned. My own father had attempted to steal from me. There was no longer even a slender thread of familial loyalty binding us together. For him, this was about survival. If he couldn't dominate me with words, he'd use money. That night, I did not sleep. I lay in bed, rehashing everything. Vanessa posted about her chalet. Mom arrives with her casserole and guilt trips. Dad's arrogant expression at my apartment. And now this. The betrayal was complex and weighty, and for the first time in my life, I discovered something that horrified and liberated me. I did not have a family. Not really. The following few days were tough. Vanessa went into overdrive on social media, portraying me as the monster. She made a vague remark about selfish people who ruin everything. Of course, all her pals expressed their sorrow. A cousin even texted me personally, asking, "Did you really cancel Christmas?" With that, the story transformed. I wasn't just left out anymore. I was painted as the bad person, the reason the family was breaking apart. Mom texted me message after message imploring me to simply fix this. She said things like, "Your father is under so much stress," and "Vanessa's heartbroken. You know how important this is to her." She never asked how I was doing. She never once acknowledged what they had done to me. At work, I found it difficult to concentrate. I'd be sitting at my desk, spreadsheets open, but my mind would go back to Dad's expression when he said, "Nothing's free." The words resonated like a curse, reminding me that in his world, love came at a cost. My performance slipped. I stayed late to avoid returning home and being alone in the silence. And loneliness struck me hard. Christmas lights were erected throughout the city. Couples walked hand in hand through adorned streets. Kids rubbed their faces to the toy store glass. Everywhere I looked, people were immersed in warmth, laughing, and unity. And me. I had a one-bedroom apartment and a stack of unanswered texts that reminded me how unwelcome I was. I'll admit, there was one night when I nearly broke. I sat with my phone in hand, my thumb lingering over the call Dad button, hoping that if I just apologized and gave in, I'd be able to reunite with my family. But then I remembered the bank call, the fake booking, and the hollow in my chest that felt different. Resolve. That was the turning point. I started tiny. I gathered all of the documents I possessed, including emails showing the chalet was booked in my name, the cancellation reimbursement, and the bank's highlighted fraud notification. I backed up Vanessa's posts, her texts demanding that I solve things, and Dad's frightening voicemail. For the first time, I stopped reacting emotionally and began viewing the issue as a chess game. Every move they made, I countered. I did not inform them what I was doing. On the surface, I remained calm. I stopped answering calls, ignored the guilt-ridden texts, and let them think I was pouting in shame. Meanwhile, I was building something stronger, something they wouldn't expect. But before I could put my plan into action, they managed to push me lower. One evening, approximately a week before Christmas, I arrived home to find an envelope nailed to my door. The letter was typed, cold, and formal. It was from Dad, albeit signed. In it, Dad stated that I would no longer be welcome at family events unless I learnt to respect their sacrifices for me. He stated that Vanessa deserved the chalet since she had demonstrated her loyalty, but I had just caused friction and disgrace. And the final line, I'll never forget it. "Patrick, you're not needed in this family. Consider this a warning." I sat on the floor of my apartment, letter in hand, staring at the words until they became blurry. That was the bottom. The type of anguish that settles deep within your chest and refuses to move. But, even in that abyss, something within me altered again. The youngster who had always sought their praise had bent himself to fit their pattern. That boy was gone. What remained was quieter, crisper, and more intentional. I was not going to struggle for their affection anymore. I was going to make sure they knew how it felt to lose what they believed they controlled. And so, in the solitude of that vacant flat, I started to plot. Something inside me came into focus after receiving that letter. It seemed like I'd spent my entire life hoping for a nod of approval that would never come. I immediately realized I didn't need it anymore. Instead of crushing me, their words, "You are not needed in this family," provided me with an unusual sense of liberation. If I was not needed, I owed them nothing. And if I owed them nothing, I could finally begin life on my own terms. The first step was to cut off the lifelines that had been quietly draining. For years I'd been assisting in ways I never realized. When Vanessa overdrew her account, I surreptitiously transferred her money. When Dad's investments plummeted, I'd cover a few bills. I'd often chip in for minor expenses like food, gas, and utilities. It was a habit created out of remorse and a desire to establish my belonging. But not anymore. I shut everything down. I changed my internet banking passwords, deactivated Mom's emergency credit card, and even diverted my mail to prevent snooping. It was like turning off a series of leaking faucets that had been running for years. Then I turned inward at work. Instead of dragging my feet, I began arriving early, putting in effort, and volunteering for projects I used to avoid. I believe part of me needed to immerse myself in something useful, but another part of me realized that every hour I spent on myself was one step closer to being free of their shadow. My supervisor noticed within a few weeks. By the new year, I was sitting in a meeting and hearing the terms promotion and salary increase. For the first time, I had a sense of momentum. My bank account has grown. I didn't spend my evenings going through their seductive texts. I removed them all. Instead, I started going to the gym after work, which I had put off for years. The weights, the perspiration, and the slow but steady progress. It all became a ritual. My body grew stronger, and my confidence improved. I wasn't the same person who sat on the floor clutching that letter anymore. The transformation spread to other aspects of my life. I reconnected with old pals that I had separated myself from since my family did not like them. Julian, a college buddy, had his own little marketing agency and invited me to help with some freelancing work. What began as a side project suddenly grew into a significant source of revenue. Julian even quipped, "Man, you've been hiding your skills for too long. If your family doesn't appreciate you, don't worry, other people will." Those words remained. For so long, I had judged my worth according to their norms. But outside of their bubble, I was regarded, respected, and even admired. And this is where the actual power shift started. Remember all the paperwork I had secretly gathered? The chalet receipts, Vanessa's posts, a bank fraud notice, and Dad's voicemail. I started fitting them together like puzzle pieces, not out of spite at first, but to assure myself that I wasn't crazy. The evidence was plainly there. They had attempted to delete, distort, and steal from me. And I had proof. The longer I looked at it, the clearer it got. If I desired retribution, it wouldn't be through ranting or emotional outbursts. It would require precision, patience, and allowing them to dig their own hole as I stood at the perimeter with the spotlight. Meanwhile, life outside their orbit only became brighter. Julian connected me to contacts who opened possibilities I had never imagined. New contracts, larger clientele, and more money than I'd ever made before. I moved into a larger apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows viewing the metropolitan skyline. Every night, I'd stand there, glass of wine in hand, gazing at the glittering lights on the horizon and thinking, this is mine. Not theirs. Mine. It was not about money or status. It was about finally creating something they couldn't touch, claim credit for, or take away. And each step forward stoked my fire, now one of determination rather than desperation. They were still sending messages, of course. Vanessa attempted the guilt trip. "You're wrecking everything. Why are you doing this to us?" Dad issued veiled threats about destroying bridges. Mom played the martyr, writing things like, "I lie awake at night worried about you." But where those words used to wound, they now only scratched me. I did not even respond. Silence became my most effective weapon. Because deep inside, I knew something others did not. They had already released their grip on me. They would soon lose much more than that. But I wasn't about to rush it. I was going to let time and success do the work. Allow them to become comfortable in their illusions. Because when the time came to strike back, it would not only be satisfying, but also indisputable. And then one afternoon, I discovered something that altered everything, something that transformed all of my quiet planning into an obvious, direct path to vengeance. The opportunity arose on an ordinary Tuesday, the type of day where nothing stands out until something changes beneath the surface. I was in Julian's office, helping him prepare a presentation for a new client. While he took a call, I glanced through my inbox and saw a message from my aunt. The same one who had contacted me puzzled about the chalet weeks before. She differed from the rest of the family. Not flawless, but less cruel and more attentive. The subject line read, "Thought you should see this." A PDF was attached, containing a scanned copy of an email chain between my father and other extended family. My heart raced as I read. Dad had indicated that Vanessa would be covering Christmas expenses this year. She stood up as the responsible one, and Patrick has decided he cannot contribute. He's humiliated, therefore we shouldn't bring it up in front of him. My stomach twisted. Responsible one. Vanessa had not even contributed a penny. Dad was reworking the story to make me look like a failure. Worse, he was instilling the notion that I couldn't afford goods, that I was somehow beneath them. But as nauseous as it made me, the email was invaluable. It confirmed what I had believed all along. Their game wasn't simply about cutting me out. It was about eliminating me and rewriting the family story so that I was portrayed as weak, selfish, and disposable. And then something occurred to me. If they wanted to play with stories, I'd make sure the truth was loud, clear, and impossible to twist. The time was also great. My promotion had just been completed, tripling my pay. Julian's freelance contracts were booming. My savings account looked better than it ever had. For the first time, I was not simply surviving. I was in a position of strength. Financially secure, professionally respected, socially connected. All aspects of my life they couldn't touch. That night, I began sketching up what I dubbed the reveal. Step 1. Document everything. I created a folder on my laptop with labeled files, including images of Vanessa's social media posts gloating about her chalet, bank bills indicating the money came from me, the cancellation receipt, the fraud warning, and now Dad's email chain. Every lie they said left a paper trail, and I had it. Step 2. Allies. My aunt was already halfway there when she sent me the email. I initially approached her tentatively, just to test the waters over coffee. She acknowledged she had always felt my parents favored Vanessa unfairly, but had no idea how far it went. She told me that your father's pride is his vulnerability. Vanessa believes anything makes her appear nice. Her words remained like pins on a map. Weaknesses, trends, and areas to strike. Step 3. Position myself where they don't expect it. Instead of isolating myself, I resumed attending extended family gatherings, birthdays, informal meals, and anything other than my parents' place. At first, there were whispers, side glances, and awkwardness from those who weren't sure which version of the story to trust. But I remained calm, polite, and present. I did not defend myself. I did not bring up the chalet. I simply let them see me. Stable job, new apartment, healthier, happy. Slowly, uncertainty began to sneak in. People recognized Vanessa's boasting did not reflect the reality they saw in me. And all the while, I was building. Julian referred me to someone who worked in event planning, and it was via this link that I received the idea for the final part of my plan. If my parents intended to utilize family gatherings as a stage, I'd make sure the brightest spotlight was shining squarely on them when the time came. Because power isn't always about having the loudest voice or the strongest grasp. Sometimes it takes patience, silently stepping out of the shadows, stacking the evidence, aligning the pieces, and waiting until your opponents are so confident they've won that they don't notice the earth crumbling beneath them. By the time Christmas arrived, my parents believed they had succeeded. They spent the holidays sulking at home. No chalet, no trip. Yet they said it was my fault, that I had ruined everything. Vanessa made a show of sharing photos with pals at a ski resort she'd named for clout, claiming it was the chalet. To the outside world, they appeared unconcerned. But I knew the truth. And I knew what was coming. Because the following step wasn't only to defend myself. It was about turning the tables, proving to everyone that the son they discarded, erased, and attempted to steal from was not weak. He was the one holding the cards. And the potential to flip the board was closer than they thought. The setting for my vengeance appeared almost too neatly. My aunt called in late January to tell me that there would be a large family gathering to celebrate my grandparents' anniversary. There were more than just cousins and uncles this time. Everyone knew me since I was a child, including aunts, uncles, family friends, and some of Dad's business partners. In other words, the exact audience my parents enjoyed performing for. The moment I hung up, I knew it was time for the reveal. I spent the next week cleaning the evidence folder that I had prepared. Every receipt, screenshot, and voicemail was carefully organized into a presentation file that I could open on my laptop and project onto a screen as needed. But the beauty of my approach was that I didn't have to yell or accuse. I merely had to present the truth quietly and deliberately, allowing their own words to do the damage. The night of the anniversary, I entered the dinner hall wearing the suit I had purchased with my promotion bonus, crisp and tailored, with a modest message. I wasn't the helpless black sheep they'd portrayed me as. I shook hands, smiled, and took praises on how well I looked. My folks quickly spotted me. Dad stiffened, Mom's polite smile wavered, and Vanessa rolled her eyes, as if I had interrupted her event. I could sense their dissatisfaction simmering, which just drove me more. Dinner was served, wine poured, and speeches delivered. Then followed the informal discussions around the tables. I waited until Vanessa brought up the chalet because she couldn't resist. She laughed loudly, telling a cousin. It was such a disaster because Patrick bailed at the last minute. Honestly, Dad and I had to scramble to make Christmas decent, but you know, some people just can't handle responsibility. Her words were bait, and I took them. I laid down my drink calmly and replied, "That's interesting, Vanessa. Because from where I sit, it looked a little different." The table fell silent. Dad quickly interjected, his voice calm but strained. "Let's not air family drama here. Tonight's about your grandparents." It made me laugh. I agree. It's about family, which is why it might be nice for everyone to know the full story since you've already started it, Vanessa. I removed my laptop from my bag. I hadn't intended to make it theatrical, but sometimes the circumstance demands it. I asked my cousin to assist me switch inputs on a projector that had been set up for a slideshow of old images. Within seconds, my screen illuminated the wall, and I showed them. First, I received a Chalet confirmation email with my name and money clearly displayed. Gasps were heard around the room. The cancellation notification with the reimbursement information was then returned to me. Vanessa's posts bragging about her chalet were followed by Dad's email chain alleging Vanessa had paid for everything. Finally, the bank issued a flagged fraud alert with his name on it. I did not raise my voice once, I did not accuse or dramatize, I simply stated, this is what happened, I paid for the chalet, they told me I wasn't invited, and when I canceled it, they attempted to use my account information without my permission. The silence that followed was oppressive, you could hear forks clinking against plates. My parents' faces were pallid and frozen. Vanessa spewed something about me distorting things, but the proof was right there, incontrovertible. Then came the murmurs. My aunt shook her head as my uncle mumbled, I knew something was off. Even one of Dad's business acquaintances leaned back and whispered, unbelievable. For once, I wasn't the outsider, I was not the one being sacked. Everyone in the room knew I was telling the truth. Dad attempted to salvage it. He rose up, glass in hand, and said, let's not overreact. It was a misunderstanding. But I stopped him off, remaining cool. A misunderstanding is forgetting to invite someone. This was deliberate, and I think everyone here deserves to know what family values mean to you. The word values hovered in the air like a blade. Mom eventually broke down, whispering, Patrick, please stop. But it was too late. The damage was done. Their carefully designed facade had shattered in front of the very individuals they wished to impress. I didn't stay very long after that. I did not need to. As I left the dining hall, I could still hear the comments and inquiries directed at them. For the first time in my life, the weight was lifted off of me. It was on them. And the joy of walking out into the chilly night air with my head held high was unlike anything I had ever experienced. But the fallout was only beginning. The consequences were immediate. And for once, I did not have to move a finger. My phone was constantly buzzing the morning after the anniversary gathering. Not from my parents. They remained mute. But from cousins, uncles, and even family acquaintances who had been present. The messages had the same tone, disbelief, sympathy, and quiet confirmation. I can't believe they treated you like that. You were correct to show everyone. You are invited to spend the holidays with us instead. Word spread immediately. My parents' reputation, which they guarded so carefully, was in shambles. Dad's colleagues who had attended the banquet stopped returning his calls. A business contact of his, who had overheard the entire chalet disaster, quit a collaboration over worries about ethics. For a man who lived by appearances, it was like seeing his empire disintegrate. Vanessa attempted damage management on social media by posting cryptic claims about poisonous siblings and jealousy, but no one bought it. Screenshots of her original gloating posts had already spread across the family. Every attempt she made to portray herself as a victim simply pushed her deeper. Friends that she had worked so hard to impress unfollowed her. Her small circle of admirers shrank suddenly. And Mom retreated totally. For years she was the peacemaker, smoothing over Dad's rants and Vanessa's entitlement. But after that night, no one was listening to her, let's just move on comments. People interpreted her silence as complicity. I remained quiet. I didn't have to brag. I did not need to say anything. Silence, which I had once despised, had become my most effective weapon. Weeks passed and the distance increased. No more calls, guilt trips, or letters nailed to my door. It was as if they recognized they had no more leverage. And the best part? I didn't miss them. For the first time in my life, I felt light. I had a job, friends, and was becoming more independent. I had peace. Then, one afternoon in March, I saw my aunt again in a cafe. She informed me that Dad tried to throw a dinner to clear the air, but few people turned up. The family was no longer interested in playing along with his vision of reality. "You don't realize it yet," she explained, smiling. "But you won. Not just against them, but against the hold they had on you." That night, I went home, stood by my apartment's window, and looked out at the city lights. For years I'd begged to sit at their table, bent myself to suit their shape, and carried the weight of their approbation like a burden I couldn't bear. But I didn't need it anymore. I had created something stronger that they couldn't change or take away. Their chalet vacation had failed. Their reputation had crumbled. Their grip on me was gone. As I moved away from the glass, a smile pulled on my lips. Because in reality, they had not barred me from attending Christmas. I had denied them entry into my home.